10 years ago, David lit a candle for his missing son. He's lit one every year since. But when a fire survivor reveals a familiar scar, David knows the truth. His boy is alive, and someone has been hiding him. The birthday candle is a gripping thriller of lost identity, buried secrets, and a father who won't stop until he brings his son home. Subscribe now. The truth is just getting started. The air inside the old church was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wood polish, candle wax, and something older, like time itself. Dust drifted in the shafts of light streaming through the stained glass windows, where angels and saints watched over rows of empty pews. David Langley sat in the fourth row from the front, as he did every year, hands folded tightly in his lap, watching the altar. It was quiet, comfortably so. There was no mass this morning, only the open-door policy St. Jude's kept on Wednesdays. Anyone could come in and sit, or grieve, or not speak at all. David had brought the candle himself, as he had for the last 10 years, a white votive with a simple cross etched in gold on the side. No words, no dates. Just the flame that always burned shorter than he wished. He stood slowly, knees creaking as he rose, and walked toward the small rack where visitors placed their offerings. The wick flared as he lit it, a flickering pinprick of light in the shadowy corner near the altar rail. David stared at the flame, his jaw tight, lips pressed together in silence. He hadn't come to pray. Not anymore. Instead, he whispered, as he always did, "Happy birthday, Tommy." His voice cracked slightly on the last syllable. His son would have turned 17 today. David's hand hovered over the candle for a moment. Then he sat back down, exhaling as he settled on the hard pew. The church echoed faintly with a shifting board in the loft above, or the ticking of the old sanctuary clock. Nothing unusual, nothing to suggest anything would be different this year. Until he saw it. Just 2 places over from where he had placed his candle, another white votive flickered. Same style, same size. It hadn't been there when he entered. He was sure of it. He would have noticed. He always lit the first candle. Frowning, David leaned forward, peering more closely at the other flame. The wax had melted unevenly down the side, pooling around the base. It was newer than his, less burned down, but not fresh. Someone had lit it recently, maybe minutes ago. He almost dismissed it. Others lit candles all the time, grieving parents, widows, students before finals. It was a church, but then he noticed something embedded in the wax, a strip of paper, small, almost folded into the candle itself. David hesitated, glancing behind him to check if anyone else was in the church. It was empty, just as it had been when he walked in. He stood again, heart starting to beat faster. The paper was partially burned at the corner, the edges curled from the heat. Carefully, he plucked it from the wax, trying not to tear it. It was just one sentence, handwritten in blocky black ink. "He's alive. Stop looking." David stood frozen, the words vibrating in his chest like a tuning fork. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The rest of the church seemed to fade into silence around him. He read the note again, then again. The paper trembled in his hand. It had to be a mistake, a prank, a coincidence, someone else's tragedy. But it wasn't, because he hadn't told anyone he was still looking, not even Rachel. He sat in his car for a long time after that, parked in the gravel lot outside St. Jude's with the note in his lap. The engine was off. The windshield was fogged from his breath and the steady drizzle of the late March morning. He stared out at the gray sky, the clouds hanging low over the hills beyond the town, the way they always did this time of year. His phone buzzed in the center console. Rachel. "Rachel, coffee's ready when you are. How was it?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't know what to say. After a minute, he replied, "David. Quiet. Beautiful, as always. Be home soon." He turned the key in the ignition, the engine grumbling to life. As he pulled out of the lot, he glanced at the folded piece of paper again. His fingers had smudged part of the writing, but the words were still legible, clear, deliberate. He's alive. The Langley house sat at the edge of town, where the sidewalks gave way to trees. A modest 2-story, green shutters faded from sun and time, wind chimes tapping gently in the breeze. Rachel had planted daffodils by the front steps this year. She always planted something on Tommy's birthday. David parked in the driveway and sat for a few seconds, staring at the house. Inside, the woman he loved more than anyone waited for him. The woman who had endured the same pain, the same empty room down the hall. And yet, he couldn't tell her. Not yet. He walked in, past the old photos on the wall. Tommy's 3rd birthday. Tommy at the lake with his red life jacket. Tommy in his Halloween astronaut costume. Every image a fragment of a life that stopped when he was 7. "Hey," Rachel said from the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, glasses perched on her nose. "You want pancakes or just coffee?" "Just coffee's good," he said. He tried to keep his voice even. She glanced at him and frowned. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." He hesitated. "Just a little tired this morning." Rachel handed him a mug and smiled faintly. 10 years is a long time, she said. "But it still feels like yesterday." David nodded. "I know." He kept the note in his wallet. All day he thought about it. He reread it in the garage, in the car, after dinner. Every time, the meaning changed. First hope, then fear, then suspicion. By nightfall, a thought he couldn't ignore began taking shape in his mind. Someone knew something. Someone was watching. That night, he returned to the church. The sanctuary was dark this time, the doors locked, but the maintenance shed was open. Someone had been cleaning earlier. David found the spare key where it always was, under the stone angel by the back steps. Inside, the candles from the morning had burned down. Only the faint scent of smoke remained. The note in his pocket felt heavier now. He walked to the altar again and looked at the rack of extinguished votives. They were all the same, except one. The candle with the note had a slight dent on its base, like it had been dropped once, long ago. A manufacturing flaw, maybe. But now he had a marker. He picked it up. The wax was soft, faintly warm even now. Someone had been here, very recently. There were no cameras in St. Jude's, no sign-in sheet, no staff after hours. But someone had left a message, and tomorrow he would start asking who. David hadn't told anyone what he'd found in the church, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Not while drinking coffee, not during his walk to the post office, not even while standing in the basement, staring at the shelves where they kept the storage boxes. He hadn't opened Tommy's box in years. Rachel had insisted on keeping it. Not a shrine, she'd said. Just memories. David had avoided it for a long time. It hurt too much. But now, with the note folded in his wallet like a burning ember, the box pulled at him. He carried it upstairs to the kitchen table, brushing away crumbs from that morning's toast. The box was gray plastic, cracked at one corner, the label faded. Tommy, age 6 to 7. Inside, a red toy car with chipped paint, a stack of crayon drawings, a shoebox of birthday cards, and a faded hoodie with cartoon rockets. David ran his fingers over it. He remembered how small Tommy had been, how stubborn, how much he'd loved stars. In the bottom, beneath a folded fleece blanket, was the police file. It wasn't the official case file. That had never been released in full. This was the copy they'd received. The civilian version, as the detective had called it. Names redacted, nothing too graphic, but it held photos, timelines, statements. David sat down with it and opened to the timeline again. May 17th, 2013, 2:45 p.m. Tommy Langley dismissed from school. 3 p.m. Seen by classmate walking alone near Ashbury Street. 3:10 p.m. Rain begins. 3:20 p.m. Neighbor reports seeing boy with red backpack at the corner of Willow and 6th. 3:30 p.m. Rachel Langley reports Tommy not home. 3:40 p.m. David Langley begins neighborhood search. 4:15 p.m. Police notified. The whole thing unraveled so fast. The rain, the empty sidewalk, the missed moment. He had replayed that day 1,000 times in his mind. Sometimes he dreamed that he got to Tommy in time. Other times, he only dreamed of rain and silence. David flipped through the rest of the file, searching for something, anything, that might connect to the candle. A name, a statement, a detail he had overlooked. One note stood out this time. Local church, St. Jude's, held vigil for missing child on May 21st, 2013. Volunteers accessed building through staff side entrance. No cameras installed. Door often unlocked for prayer hours. David stared at that sentence. St. Jude's, the candle, the note, that same church. Had someone left the message because they had been involved in the original search? Or were they involved in something else entirely? That afternoon, David drove to the church office. It was attached to a modest brick building next to the sanctuary, where an administrative assistant named Judy had worked for as long as he could remember. "David," she greeted with a warm but cautious smile. "Nice to see you. Been a while." "Hi, Judy," he said. "I was wondering if the church keeps records from past community events, like vigils." She tilted her head. "Some. Depends how far back." 2013, he said. "Tommy's vigil." Her face softened. "Oh, of course." She gestured toward a filing cabinet behind the desk. "We might have a sign-up sheet or press clippings. You're welcome to look." David sorted through manila folders filled with yellowing newsletters and fundraiser lists. Then he found it. Event, Community Vigil, Missing Child. Tommy Langley. Date, May 21st, 2013. Volunteers, incomplete. Rachel Langley, Ava S. Megan, H. Father John. Names smudged Ava. That name tugged at his memory. Ava Schmidt, yes. She had been Rachel's yoga friend, young, passionate, 20-something back then. She'd brought candles and led songs during the vigil, and then disappeared from their lives. David asked Judy if Ava was still around. "I think she moved away, but last year she helped with the Christmas pageant. I can check the contact sheet." 5 minutes later, Judy handed him a phone number and a partial address. Same town, same woman. David thanked her and left, the note still in his wallet, now weighed down by memory and potential. Rachel noticed the difference that evening. "You're quiet," she said, handing him a bowl of soup at dinner. "More than usual." He hesitated. He wanted to tell her. Part of him wanted her to come along, wanted to believe in this with him. But what if it was nothing? "Just thinking," he said. "About Tommy. About everything." Rachel sat down across from him and stirred her soup. "I think about him all the time, you know." "I know." She looked up. "I used to believe he was alive. Truly believe it. Every time a news report came on, every time someone mentioned a child found, I imagined it was him." David nodded. "I don't anymore," she said softly. "I don't want to hope if it means falling again." David stared at his soup. "Do you ever wonder what we missed?" Rachel's hands went still on the table. "Every day." The next morning, David called the number Judy had given him. A tired voice answered. "Hello? Ava, this is David Langley, Tommy's father." A pause, then, "Oh my God, Mr. Langley, I didn't expect. Is everything okay? I just wanted to ask you something. Do you remember anything from the vigil at St. Jude's? Anything strange?" Silence again. "I might," she said finally. "But I'd rather not talk on the phone. Can we meet?" They met at a quiet coffee shop near the edge of town. Ava had aged, but not harshly. Her hair was longer now, streaked with gray at the temples. She wore a long coat and looked like she hadn't slept much. They sat by the window. "I always wondered what happened to him," she said after a moment. "That night at the vigil, there were people I didn't know. People who weren't from church." David leaned forward. "Like who?" "There was a man," Ava said slowly. "He showed up late. Tall, dressed like he'd come from work. I thought he was just another volunteer, but he asked a lot of questions about you, about Tommy. Said he wanted to help." David's heart thudded. "Did you catch a name?" "Number, but I remember his voice. Low, careful, not warm." "Did anyone else notice him?" Ava shook her head. "He stayed near the back. I asked Father John, but he said he didn't remember him either." David took a breath. "I think someone lit a candle this week, left me a message." Ava blinked. "After all this time?" He nodded. She swallowed. "Do you think Tommy's still alive?" David hesitated. Then, "I don't know. But I think someone knows more than they ever said." David woke early the next morning, long before the sun had climbed above the ridge outside their window. Rachel still slept, curled under the blanket with her hand resting lightly on the empty pillow beside her, the same side Tommy used to crawl into when he had nightmares. David stared at the ceiling, listening to the creak of the wind against the shutters. The silence didn't feel peaceful today. He got out of bed and dressed quietly, his phone in hand. He'd saved Ava's number the night before. He wanted to ask her more, about the man she'd seen, about anything she remembered. But he needed to be sure she wasn't just telling him what he wanted to hear. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like the burnt coffee pot Rachel had forgotten to empty the night before. David dumped it out and opened the back door to let in the morning chill. He stood on the steps, breathing in the cold air, the distant hum of the highway barely audible. That's when his phone buzzed. It was an anonymous number. No name, no area code he recognized. He hesitated, then answered. At first, only silence. Then, a low, distorted voice came through the line. "Let him go." David's spine stiffened. "You're not helping anyone by digging this back up. He's safe. That's more than most get." "Who is this?" David asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Just stop, or the next candle is yours." The line went dead. He stood frozen on the steps for a long time. His hand shook as he looked at the call log. No callback option, just unknown and a timestamp. A threat, a clear one. Rachel called out from upstairs, and he slipped his phone into his pocket before she came down. "You're up early," she said, yawning, rubbing her eyes. "Couldn't sleep." She noticed his expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he lied. "Just cold." David didn't go to work that day. He had retired early from his job at the post office 3 years ago, but still helped part-time at the library shelving returned books. It gave him routine, normalcy, but not today. Instead, he sat in his car outside St. Jude's again, watching the church entrance. People came and went, mostly older women, the occasional young man carrying groceries for the food bank. Nothing unusual. But as he turned to leave, he noticed a car parked across the street, a silver sedan, windows tinted too dark for a car that old. It hadn't been there when he arrived. He waited. The car didn't move. As he drove off, it pulled out 2, 3 cars back. He changed lanes. So did it. He turned left. The car kept going straight. Coincidence? Maybe. But his hand stayed on the wheel a little tighter. That afternoon, David walked to the library. Not to work, to search. The library still kept paper archives of local newspapers. He pulled the drawer for May 2013 and skimmed the headlines. Search continues for missing boy community. Holds candlelight vigil volunteers. Join effort in Tommy Langley case. He scanned through pages, looking for photos. On one, he found a crowd shot from the vigil. Grainy, black and white, but clear enough to make out faces. Rachel, standing with him, holding a candle. Father John in the background, and there, a tall man near the edge of the crowd. Suit jacket, hair slicked back, no candle, no badge, just observing. The man Ava had described. David pulled out his phone and took a picture of the newspaper photo. Then he looked up, realizing someone was standing beside him. Mr. Langley, a young woman in her 20s, dark coat, messenger bag slung over one shoulder. Yes? I'm Ava's niece. She said you might be here. David stood. Is something wrong? She told me to give you this. The girl handed him a plain white envelope and left before he could ask another question. Inside, a torn notebook page with one sentence in Ava's handwriting. We weren't the only ones searching for Tommy that week. He drove home slower than usual. The wind had picked up. Trees leaned over the street like eavesdroppers. When he parked, he saw it again. The silver sedan. Parked 2 houses down, engine off. Empty, as far as he could tell, but angled slightly toward his driveway. David stood by his car a little too long, eyes locked on the vehicle. Finally, he approached it. No movement inside, just reflections on the dark glass. He knocked on the window once, nothing. Twice, still nothing. He stepped back and pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the license plate just as the driver's side window slid down 2 inches. A man's voice, calm and cold. Careful, Mr. Langley. Obsession can be dangerous. Then the car rolled forward and disappeared around the corner. That night, Rachel noticed the tension. What's going on, David? You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. I know you too well. He sat down on the edge of the couch, the note still in his pocket, the photo of the man from the vigil on his phone. I think someone's hiding something, he said. Something from when Tommy disappeared. Rachel's face paled. What are you talking about? Someone left me a note at St. Jude's. Someone who knew what that candle meant. David, and today, I got a phone call. Someone telling me to stop asking questions. Rachel stood abruptly. You should go to the police. I did. 10 years ago. And where did that get us? They'll take it more seriously if... He shook his head. They'll tell me it's nothing. They'll tell me I'm imagining things. Rachel's voice trembled. What if you are? David looked at her, the woman who had shared his grief, his empty mornings, and his worst nightmares. Then let me be wrong. Nay, he said. But I have to know. Later that night, as the house slept and the wind pushed at the shutters, David sat alone in Tommy's old room. The posters had faded. The closet was empty, but on the bookshelf, a single item remained. A red toy car, its paint chipped, its wheels stiff. He picked it up. Underneath it, tucked into the corner of the shelf where the back met the wall. Another piece of paper. Folded once. It wasn't your fault. The next morning, David returned to St. Jude's again. This time, not just to sit and reflect. He was looking for something. He parked farther down the street, behind the community garden, so that if the silver sedan was back, they wouldn't see his car. The sky was overcast again. A dull gray pressing low over the rooftops. The church looked the same as it always had. Still, silent, eternal. But David couldn't see it the same way anymore. He entered through the side door, the one that led past the sacristy and into the main sanctuary. It was just after 10 a.m. The church was open for silent prayer, but nearly empty. Just one older man in the back pew, head bowed. A nun near the altar, arranging lilies in a vase. David gave them both a polite nod and headed toward the rack of votive candles. He found the one with the dented base again, the one he'd marked in his mind. There was no new message this time, but something caught his eye. A line of wax droplets, trailing from the rack down the side of the altar rail. It wasn't much, Just a faint line of hardened white globs, like someone had tilted a lit candle and walked carelessly with it. He followed the trail slowly, glancing up now and then to be sure no one was watching too closely. The wax led toward the far end of the sanctuary, past the baptismal font, to the side hallway that led to the maintenance room and janitor's closet. The last drip was just outside the closet door. David tried the handle. Locked. He paused, listening. Nothing. He knocked once. No response. Then again, harder. Still nothing. He looked around and then stepped back, scanned the hallway, and saw it. A thin strip of light at the bottom of the utility door next to the closet. A second entrance. He walked back through the sanctuary and into the side corridor near the offices. From there, he found the door to the utility room unlocked. Inside was a mop bucket, cleaning supplies, and a few old wooden shelves lined with dusty hymnals. Nothing unusual, until he noticed the trap door in the floor, barely visible beneath a rolled-up mat. He peeled it back. The latch was stiff, rusted from age, but it came up with a grunt. David opened it. A narrow staircase led down, rough concrete steps descending into a crawl space beneath the church. He hesitated, then climbed down, leaving the trap door open behind him. The space below was dark, but not pitch black. Faint light filtered through a small vent near the ground. The air was damp and musty. It smelled like wet wood and mildew. David's phone flashlight cut a soft comb through the dust and shadow. There were footprints in the dirt. Not recent, weeks, maybe months old, but human. Faint imprints in the fine earth, leading toward the far wall where the foundation stones had cracked slightly over time. David followed them. Near the corner, something was half buried beneath a board, a child's shoe. Red canvas, worn, untied. He knelt, hands trembling as he picked it up. It was Tommy's. He knew it instantly. One of a pair they had bought the spring before he vanished. He remembered how proud Tommy was of the bright red color, how he'd insisted on wearing them to bed the first night. David sat back on his heels, the shoe in his lap, his heart pounding. A decade buried. A decade forgotten. But someone had brought it here. It hadn't decayed like it should have outside. It had been protected, hidden, preserved. He stood, brushing dust from his knees, and then he noticed something else. On the wall above the shoe, just faintly visible in the concrete, scratched by hand. TL. Just 2 initials, but they were enough. He staggered back up the steps, the shoe clutched tightly in one hand, his breath coming shallow. Back in the main sanctuary, he placed the shoe inside his coat and made his way out quickly, barely nodding to the nun arranging flowers near the altar. He didn't go straight home. He couldn't. Instead, he drove to the cemetery on the edge of town, not to visit a grave, but to sit in the car, away from the world, and try to breathe. His thoughts were scattered, pounding. The shoe, the trap door, the initials. Someone had been keeping pieces of Tommy, literally and figuratively, hidden all these years, not just watching but preserving. Why? For guilt, control, remembrance. David pulled out his phone and dialed Ava. She answered on the second ring. "I found something," he said without preamble. "One of Tommy's shoes, hidden under the church." A pause. "That makes no sense," she said. "That area was searched." "Not under the floor. Beneath the utility room. There's a trap door. Someone's been down there. Do you think—" She stopped herself. "Do you think it was the man from the vigil?" "I don't know," David said, "but I'm not letting this go. I'll help however I can," she said quietly. "I might need that." That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting shadows. He didn't tell Rachel about the shoe. Not yet. She needed peace. She needed sleep. He couldn't take that from her. Not until he was sure. At 2:13 a.m., he got out of bed, careful not to wake her, and walked down the hallway. He stopped at Tommy's room, opened the door. Inside, the moonlight cast pale lines across the carpet. The room had been cleaned out long ago, but he still kept the bookshelf and a few of Tommy's drawings framed on the wall. He sat in the chair by the window and held the red shoe in his lap. Outside, across the street, the silver sedan had returned. Engine off, lights off, watching. David didn't look away this time. The morning came quietly, the sky heavy with clouds, rain misting down like breath on glass. Rachel stood at the sink, staring out the window with a dish in her hand, unmoving. The coffee pot gurgled behind her, the scent thick but ignored. David stepped into the kitchen, the red shoe heavy in his coat pocket. Rachel turned. "You didn't sleep. Neither did you." She gave a small, sad smile. "I always feel it more around his birthday. I try not to, but it still finds a way in." David didn't sit down. He stayed by the counter, one hand resting against the edge. He was tired of waiting. "I need to ask you something," he said. Rachel turned fully now, dish forgotten. David drew a breath. "Do you remember getting any mail last year? Anything strange?" Rachel blinked. "What do you mean?" He reached into the junk drawer and pulled out the envelope she had tucked there nearly a year ago. He had found it by accident while searching for a roll of tape. "Postcard, coastal town, no return address." Rachel's shoulders stiffened. "I didn't want to bring it up," she said softly. "It felt like I was inviting something back in." David studied her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" She hesitated. "Because it felt like hope, and I didn't want to hurt you with something that could be nothing." She walked to the dining table and opened the envelope. The postcard inside showed a seaside boardwalk. In the foreground, a group of people stood facing the ocean. One of them, a teenage boy, tall, lean, stood with his back to the camera. Hair the same shade as Tommy's. Posture familiar. David picked it up again, studying the image. The card was unsigned. The stamp had no cancellation mark. "I found this in the mail bin," Rachel said quietly. No note, no explanation. Just this. Why keep it? Because part of me wanted to believe it was him, but I also know what it would do to us if it wasn't. David sat down slowly. "There's more," he said. Rachel's brow furrowed. "I went back to St. Jude's, found wax trails leading to the old janitor's closet. Inside there's a trap door, goes under the church." He paused, watching her reaction. "I found Tommy's shoe down there, one of the red ones, with his initials scratched into the wall above it." Rachel didn't speak. Her face had gone pale, lips parted slightly in disbelief. "I didn't imagine it," David added. "Someone's been keeping parts of him close, watching." Rachel lowered herself into a chair, her hands in her lap. She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you remember Daniel?" she asked suddenly. David's heart skipped. "Daniel?" "The family friend. From the search team, he helped organize volunteers, spoke at the vigil." David's mind reeled backward. He remembered a man, tall, calm, always dressed neatly, charismatic in a quiet way. "I haven't thought about him in years," David admitted. "I ran into him last summer," Rachel said, "at the farmer's market. He asked about you, about Tommy. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he made me feel—" She searched for the word. "Watched, like he wasn't just reminiscing, like he still knew something." David leaned forward. "Rachel, you think he's involved?" "I don't know, but I know how I felt when he smiled at me. Like he was hiding something. Something heavy." David stood abruptly and walked to the living room window. The silver sedan wasn't outside anymore, but its absence was almost worse. He turned back to her. "There's a reason someone doesn't want us digging deeper," he said. "And if Daniel was close enough to know our routines, to be in that church—" "We need to be careful," Rachel said quietly. David walked to the coat rack, pulled on his jacket, and slipped the postcard into his pocket. Then he reached inside and pulled out the red shoe. He handed it to her gently. Rachel took it in both hands like it might break. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. But David saw her shoulders begin to shake. "I need to talk to Ava again," he said. "And then I think it's time to find out where that postcard came from." Rachel nodded, eyes still fixed on the shoe. "Bring him home," she whispered. That evening David met Ava again, this time in her apartment on the edge of town. It was a modest second-floor walk-up, filled with books and scented candles, the kind of place that suggested someone lived alone and tried very hard to feel safe. Ava handed him a mug of tea and sat across from him. "I remembered something else," she said. "From the vigil. The man who was there, he wore a lapel pin, small, gold, like a lighthouse or an anchor. I didn't think anything of it back then, but now?" David nodded. "Daniel had a pin like that, from a non-profit he worked with. Do you have a photo of him?" David pulled out his phone, opened the scanned newspaper image, and zoomed in on the man standing alone at the vigil's edge. Ava leaned forward. Her face changed. "That's him." David nodded. "Rachel saw him again last summer. We think he's still in town, still watching." Ava reached into a folder on her table and pulled out a printed page. "Look at this. I checked the postal stamp from that postcard Rachel received. No cancellation mark. That means it wasn't mailed. It was probably hand-delivered." David felt a chill. "Which means whoever left it knew where we lived." "They're not trying to help," Ava said. "They're trying to control what you know. They want you to stop just short of the truth." David clenched his jaw. "Then they don't know me very well." That night, back at home, Rachel placed Tommy's red shoe on the fireplace mantel beside his photo. They didn't speak much, but for the first time in a decade, David felt like they were moving forward. Not with grief, but with purpose. The drive to the coast took just under 4 hours. David hadn't told Rachel he was leaving until he was halfway there. She didn't argue. Not this time. Maybe because she knew he wouldn't turn back. The postcard had been printed locally, Ava confirmed. A souvenir type, sold mostly to tourists in a town called Briar's Hollow, a quiet seaside village with a boardwalk, a handful of shops, and a reputation for being quaint on travel blogs. David had never been there. Neither had Tommy. Not that he knew of, but someone had chosen that place, that image, and that stamp-free delivery. It wasn't random. He arrived just after noon. The sky was low and moody, fog rolling in from the water. Seagulls cried overhead as he parked near the marina. The postcard image had been taken from the east side of the boardwalk, so he walked that way first, camera photo pulled up on his phone, comparing details. A sculpture near the pier, the curve of the railings, the placement of the benches. It matched. This was the place. He stood where the photographer must have stood, looking out across the boardwalk, people coming and going in windbreakers and beanies, vendors setting up carts with saltwater taffy and sketchbook portraits. And then he heard it. A voice, singing. A teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, was sitting on a bench not far from the edge of the pier, strumming a worn guitar and singing softly. His voice was raw but familiar. The song. David's breath caught. Golden Slumbers. It was the Beatles' lullaby he used to sing to Tommy at night, back when he was little, before the dark became something to fear. David had only sung it once in public, during a school talent show when Tommy had begged him to. The boy looked up briefly. Brown hair, wind-tossed. Sharp jawline. Tall. Something about the eyes. He didn't look exactly like Tommy, but enough to make David's heart seize. David took a slow step forward. The boy caught his eye. Then he bolted. The guitar dropped to the bench with a clatter. The boy sprinted across the boardwalk, weaving between vendors, cutting past a seafood shack and disappearing around a corner. David ran after him. His legs didn't move like they used to, Age, adrenaline, and uncertainty tangled together. But he kept going, chasing the boy into a narrow alley between two buildings. Gone. David stood there, chest heaving. Just a moment too late. He searched for nearly an hour, circling the town square, checking shops, even speaking with two nearby vendors. One remembered the boy, said he'd been performing there for a few weeks, called himself Lucas, didn't talk much, slept in a trailer park just outside of town. David drove there next. The trailer park was quiet. A line of rusted mailboxes, satellite dishes pointing skyward like bent fingers. He asked around, cautiously. Most residents didn't know names, but a woman in a housecoat and slippers pointed toward a trailer near the back, blue paint peeling at the corners. "That's the one with the boy," she said. "Keeps to himself, quiet. Good kid, I think." David knocked. No answer. He waited. Knocked again. Nothing. But as he turned to leave, a movement caught his eye. Through the narrow window near the trailer's side, a curtain shifted. Someone was in there. He left his name scribbled on a notepad from his glove box and tucked it into the door frame. Then he drove back toward the boardwalk to wait. The fog thickened as the afternoon wore on, curling over rooftops and street lamps. David sat at a bench near the place where the boy had been singing, watching, waiting. Around 5, he saw him again. The boy moved cautiously, hood pulled up now, shoulders hunched. He walked with the quiet alertness of someone used to avoiding notice. But David noticed. He stood. "Lucas?" he called gently. The boy flinched. He didn't run this time, but he paused, eyes wide, body tense. "I'm not here to hurt you," David said. I need to ask you something." The boy said nothing. David stepped closer, slowly. "My son disappeared 10 years ago. You look like him. You sing like him. That song, I used to sing that to him." "I don't know you," the boy said finally. His voice was scratchy, like he didn't use it much. "Were you born in 2006? David asked. The boy's jaw clenched. "I don't know when I was born." That stopped David cold. "Do you have parents?" "No." "Do you remember anything from when you were little?" A long silence, then, "Sometimes, in dreams." David pulled out his phone and showed him a photo of Tommy at age 7, gap-toothed, smiling in a red jacket. The boy's eyes locked on the screen, but his face gave away nothing. "Do you recognize him?" "No." David lowered the phone. "If you're not him, then I'm sorry. But if you are, you don't have to be alone anymore." The boy said nothing. Then he turned and walked away. This time, David didn't chase him. That night, David stayed in a small motel just off the highway. One bed. No art on the walls. Just the buzz of an old mini-fridge and the occasional cry of seagulls outside. He sat at the window, watching the ocean in the distance. He wasn't sure what he had found. Was it Tommy? A boy trained to forget? A stranger caught in the web of someone else's grief? His phone buzzed just after 11 p.m. Unknown number. David answered. "You shouldn't be here." Same distorted voice as before. "You're closer than you think, but you won't like what you find." David gripped the phone tighter. "Who are you?" "You're looking at the wrong son." The line went dead. David sat in the silence, heart pounding. Then he looked down at the photo of Tommy again, and for the first time, noticed the corner of the postcard had been torn off, as if someone had removed a name. The next morning, David returned to the trailer park just after sunrise. Fog hung low over the rooftops, thick and wet against the skin. Most of the park was still asleep. Shades drawn, coffee brewing behind windows, only the occasional bark of a dog echoing across the gravel paths. He walked to the blue trailer where the boy, Lucas, had disappeared the day before. The paper note he'd left was gone. This time someone answered the door. A woman in her early 60s, dressed in a beige cardigan and faded jeans. Her gray hair was pulled back neatly, her expression composed. Pleasant, almost professional. "Can I help you?" she asked. David straightened. "I'm looking for a boy who sings on the boardwalk. They said he stays here. Calls himself Lucas." The woman's expression didn't change. "We don't discuss the children's details with strangers." "Are you a guardian?" "I help where I can," she said. "I provide temporary shelter, but I don't answer to social services." "That's not what I asked." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who are you?" "I'm David Langley," he said. "My son disappeared 10 years ago. His name was Tommy. I believe your Lucas might be him." A long pause. Then the woman stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. "My name is Linda March," she said. "I've been taking in stray teens for 15 years. Runaways, abuse victims, forgotten cases. I don't ask many questions. They don't always have answers." "That's convenient," David said. "Sometimes survival looks like silence." David held up a photo. "Is this the boy who lives here?" Linda looked at it. "Too long." Then, "He's not your son." "How do you know?" "Because I know every child who comes through my door. Lucas arrived 3 years ago, barely spoke a word. No name, no history, just fear." David's voice softened. "That could be Tommy. He was taken when he was 7. If someone hurt him—" "Lucas isn't your son," she said again, firmer this time. "And it's dangerous to project your pain onto him. He's been through enough." "He sang a song I used to sing to Tommy. How would he know that?" "Children remember strange things," she replied. "Bits and pieces, especially when they want to believe in something new." David stepped closer. "If you're wrong, and he is my son, then you're keeping him from the people who've been grieving him for a decade." Linda didn't move. "If I'm right, and you're not his father, then you're pushing a broken child deeper into trauma." The two stood in silence, the space between them charged with years of pain, suspicion, and something else. Truth, buried deep. "I want a DNA test," David said. Linda's expression didn't change. "That's not up to me. It's up to him." David didn't return to the motel. He waited in his car across the street, watching the trailer. Hours passed. No sign of the boy. No movement at all. At 4:17 p.m., the door finally opened. Lucas stepped out, hood pulled over his head, guitar slung across his back. He walked with slow, deliberate steps, as if rehearsing them. David got out of the car and followed at a distance. Lucas didn't head to the boardwalk this time. He cut through the side streets, avoiding crowds, until he reached a small park near the water. There, he sat on a bench under a willow tree and pulled out his guitar. David approached slowly. "Can I sit?" he asked. Lucas didn't answer, but didn't object. "I talked to the woman at the trailer," David said. "She said you've been there 3 years, that you don't remember much from before." Lucas strummed a few chords. "She helped me when no one else would," David nodded. "She might have saved your life. But if you're my son, I want to give you the rest of it back." Lucas looked up finally. His eyes were tired, older than they should be. David took a breath. "Do you remember the lake house? You used to throw rocks from the dock and name every splash. You called the big ones crashers and the small ones blippers." Lucas blinked, then looked away. David reached into his coat and pulled out the red shoe, held it gently in his lap. "This was yours. You wore them almost every day the year you vanished. We found one under the church, hidden." Lucas stared at the shoe. Then, softly, "I used to have a dog, I think. Brown ears. Name started with an S." David's throat tightened. "Sammy." Lucas nodded. The wind shifted. The sea rustled nearby like a living thing. "I don't know who I am," Lucas said finally, "but I don't feel like anyone." David swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "I don't care if you remember me," he said. "You don't have to. I just want you safe, and I want the truth." Lucas stared at the waves. Then, okay. That night, in a sterile clinic 30 miles inland, David and Lucas submitted saliva samples. It would take a week to get results, but something had already changed. Back at the motel, David sat on the edge of the bed, phone buzzing. A text from Ava. "You need to come home. Something's happened. Rachel found someone watching the house." David's heart sank. Then another message came in from unknown. "You've gone too far." Attached was a photo, taken from the sidewalk, Rachel standing in the window. David drove all night. The clinic where he and Lucas had submitted their DNA samples was 2 towns inland, but by the time he hit the highway, every mile felt longer, like he was racing against something he couldn't see. The photo still burned in his mind. Rachel standing at the window, unaware she'd been photographed. Not from a distance, not from a passing car, from the sidewalk. Close. Bold. The unknown number had gone silent after that. David tried calling twice. No answer. Just a click, then static. At 4:03 a.m., he pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on, a single bulb casting a pool of yellow on the front steps. Everything looked the same, but felt different. Office staged. He stepped out of the car, keys clenched tight between his fingers. He didn't knock. He pushed through the door. "Rachel," he called, louder than he meant to. "Rachel!" Footsteps thudded overhead. She appeared at the top of the stairs in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, eyes wide with alarm. "David?" What's wrong?" He exhaled. Relief crashed into him so hard he had to lean against the wall. "You're okay." Rachel descended the stairs quickly. "Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be?" David showed her the photo. Her face went still. "This was sent to me 2 hours ago," he said. "It means someone's been outside, watching the house, up close." Rachel sat down slowly on the arm of the couch. "I knew I felt something. 2 days ago I saw a man near the side gate. I thought he was lost, but he didn't knock. Just looked at the windows, then left." David looked around the room. It felt like a stage set now, like they were inside someone else's story. "We need to call the police." Rachel nodded. "I already did. After I got Ava's message. A local officer came by, did a walk around the house, said he didn't see anything, left an incident report. That was it." "They didn't stay. Why would they? We've been grieving parents for a decade. Everyone thinks we're haunted." David clenched his fists. "Then we need to stop waiting for someone else to help us." By midday, David was on the phone with Ava. "I need everything you can find on Daniel," he said. "Last name, employment history, addresses, family. He was at the vigil. He knew things back then. I think he's still involved now." Ava hesitated. "I've been looking," she said. "He was never in the official volunteer roster. No church employment, no records. But I found something else." "What?" "He used to go by a different name. Daniel March." David froze. "March? Like Linda March?" "I think they're siblings." Back in Briar's Hollow, Lucas sat on the motel bed, watching cartoons with the volume low. His feet dangled off the edge. He looked younger now, without the guitar or the street performance mask. Just a boy again, tired, hollowed out. David sat beside him and gently placed a small plastic bag on the table. Inside, a child's drawing, folded and weather-worn. Lucas looked down at it. "You made this," David said. 10 years ago, you drew our house and labeled everyone. You even wrote Tommy's room in shaky letters above the roof." Lucas didn't speak, but his eyes remained on the paper. "I found it in the church," David continued. "Under the floorboards, hidden with the shoe." "I didn't go to church," Lucas said quietly. "You did once," David replied. "After you disappeared. Someone took you there. Maybe Daniel. Maybe Linda. Maybe both." Lucas turned toward him. "Why would they keep that?" "I don't know. Guilt? Proof? Control?" David rubbed his face. But I think they were involved in taking you, or finding you, and raising you in silence. Lucas hesitated. They weren't mean. No, David said softly. Sometimes that's the worst kind of prison. Ava called back that evening. I found something, she said. Linda March ran a foster program in 3 different counties over 15 years. Never licensed, but never shut down. Quiet, under the radar. She worked with youth services until 2012. Then her name drops off completely, until she appears in Briar's Hollow 3 years ago. That's when Lucas appeared, David said. She was hiding something, but that's not all. Ava took a breath. Daniel March was questioned in another missing persons case. 6 months before Tommy vanished, a girl named Hannah Llewellyn, 9 years old, disappeared on her way home from a summer program. Her case was never solved. David felt the coldness spread through his chest. And he walked away from that? No charges. But he was seen near her school multiple times. He claimed he was there for work. No one pressed. David stood up. He's a collector. What? He targets children who are vulnerable, lost, or just unsupervised. Maybe he convinces himself he's rescuing them. Maybe he believes it. But that doesn't change what he is. David drove back to Linda's trailer. This time, he didn't knock. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. The place was clean. Too clean. Like it had been cleared out in a hurry. No sign of Linda. No clothes, no food, no photos. But in the back closet, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, he found a shoebox. Inside, old teeth in tiny plastic baggies, medical files, a school ID, and a journal. TL embossed faintly on the cover. David opened it with shaking hands. Inside, drawings, fragments of memory, single words. Red house, lake, Mom, birdsong, don't talk. Then, on the final page, Mr. March says we don't have to be who we were. He says new names make us new. David sat back. There was no doubt now. Lucas was Tommy. He left the trailer with the shoebox under his arm and walked out into the night. Across the road, a man stood under a flickering street lamp. Tall, trim, clean-shaven. David froze. Daniel? The man didn't move. David took a step forward. You took him, he said. You took my son. Daniel finally smiled. I gave him a life. David's heart pounded as he stepped off the curb. Daniel March stood perfectly still beneath the street lamp, his hands in the pockets of a charcoal gray coat. The flickering light above him cast sharp shadows on his angular face. He looked calm, disarmingly so. Like he had expected this moment all along. I gave him a life, Daniel said again, his voice smooth and practiced. David kept the shoebox tucked under his arm, jaw clenched. You stole him. I rescued him, Daniel said. From chaos, from a world that wasn't keeping him safe. David took a step closer. You took a 7-year-old child walking home from school. You erased his name. Erased us. Daniel didn't flinch. Do you have any idea what would have happened if I hadn't found him? Your town had moved on before the posters even came down. You all stopped looking. I never stopped. No, Daniel said slowly. You didn't. That's why we're here. David wanted to lunge, to break something, but he forced himself to stay still, to listen. You kept him for 10 years, he said. Under a different name. In silence. Why? Daniel's voice softened, like he was offering a bedtime story. Because he was blank. He didn't know who he was, not really. He cried for days, then stopped. And when he stopped, he started listening. To me. To Linda. We gave him structure, simplicity. We told him he didn't have to remember. He didn't want to. You conditioned him to forget. David spat. Daniel tilted his head. You call it conditioning. I call it freedom. A muscle twitched in David's cheek. I know who he is now, he said, and so does he. He's getting tested. It's over. Daniel smiled thinly. It's not over, not yet. There was movement behind David. A sound near the alley across the street. A soft footfall. A scrape of gravel. David turned instinctively, and then fire bloomed. Not in his body, but behind him. The trailer. Flames leapt up in sudden bursts, licking at the dry awning, climbing fast. A burst of heat hit his back. David spun fully. What the hell? Smoke poured from the vents. Windows cracked. Within seconds, the roof began to blacken. Daniel hadn't moved. You wanted closure, he said softly. That's what closure looks like. Everything you thought you needed, gone. David dropped the shoebox and ran toward the burning trailer. The fire spread fast, accelerant fast. He covered his mouth with his sleeve, kicked the door in. Heat and smoke exploded outward. "Tommy!" he shouted. "Lucas!" No response. He braced himself and pushed through the entryway, eyes stinging, lungs burning. But the trailer was empty. He stumbled out just as sirens began to rise in the distance, wailing across the coastal road. Daniel was gone, vanished into the smoke and fog. David spent the next 2 hours at the fire scene, questioned, checked for injuries. His statement taken by a sheriff's deputy who looked barely old enough to drive. Lucas never returned. Linda March didn't either. The trailer was a total loss. Most of the evidence David had found, gone in the blaze. All he had left was the journal, which he had dropped when he ran, but found later in the grass, smoke-singed but intact. That night, David returned to the motel, drenched in ash and silence. Lucas was there, sitting on the floor of the room, legs crossed, arms wrapped around his knees. David's breath caught. "I saw the fire," Lucas said quietly. "I was walking back, then I saw him." "Daniel." Lucas nodded. David closed the door behind him. "Did he talk to you?" Lucas shook his head. "He watched me, then turned away." David knelt. "Did you ever remember anything about when he first found you?" Lucas didn't answer right away. Then, "He told me no one was coming for me, that I didn't matter, that my old life didn't exist anymore." David's voice cracked. "He lied." "I know." Lucas looked at him now, really looked like a curtain had lifted. "You never stopped looking?" David shook his head. "Not for a single day." Lucas's eyes filled, his lips parted, but no words came. Only a choked breath. David reached forward. "You don't have to remember everything. You just have to know who you are now." Lucas nodded once, then leaned forward and let David pull him in. The next morning, David called the detective who had originally led Tommy's case, Ron Keller, now retired. He hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. Keller's voice was gravelly, but familiar. "David, I've been following the reports. You've stirred up something big. I have a name, Daniel March, and a woman, Linda. Foster system ghosts, both connected to Tommy. To others, I think." "I'm listening," Keller said. "Send me what you have. I'll help however I can." David looked out the window of the motel. The sun was rising over Briar's Hollow, scattering golden light across the water. And for the first time in 10 years, he wasn't chasing a ghost. He was protecting his son. A week later, the DNA results came in. David sat in the passenger seat of Ron Keller's car as they drove back from the county lab, the envelope on his lap. He hadn't opened it yet, not because he didn't believe, but because he already knew. Still, he needed to see it, to make it real. His hands trembled as he peeled the flap open. The paper inside was clinical, unemotional, just numbers, percentages, and a final conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.997%. Conclusion, David Langley is the biological father of subject B, Lucas March. He folded the paper and pressed it to his chest. "I knew," he said quietly. Ron nodded, one hand on the wheel. "So did I." The police, with Ron's guidance and David's statements, issued a formal warrant for Daniel March. But by the time they searched his last known residence, an abandoned cottage outside Mornington, he was gone. The place was empty, wiped clean. Only a few personal items remained. Old newspapers, dried food, a single framed photo of a child no one could identify. Linda March hadn't been seen since the fire. The authorities began connecting the dots between missing children, dead-end foster placements, unregistered guardianships. It would take time to build a full case, but the patterns were already emerging. For now, the focus was Tommy. Lucas, a boy with 2 names and a future still uncertain. Back in Mornington, David stood outside St. Jude's Church with Rachel beside him. She held his hand tightly. Lucas stood on the other side, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, looking down at the sidewalk, shoulders hunched but steady. There were 10 candles this time, each one burning for a year lost. They placed them on the church steps. No fanfare, no ceremony, just light, just presence. Rachel spoke first. "You were never forgotten," she said. "Even when it hurt too much to hope, we never stopped loving you." Lucas looked up. His eyes, so much older than his years, shimmered with something unspoken. David knelt beside him. "We're not asking you to become the boy you were," he said. "Just to let us walk with you now, wherever you go." Lucas nodded once. Then he reached forward and lit the last candle himself. The flame caught, flickered, and held. Later that week, they held a private gathering by the lake house, a place Tommy had loved as a boy. Friends from the old neighborhood came. Ava brought cupcakes with blue frosting. Detective Ron Keller said a few words. No speeches, no press. Just family, healing slowly. David spread a blanket near the dock and watched Lucas throw small rocks into the water, naming them under his breath. "Crashers," he said. "Blippers." David smiled through tears. He remembered. That night back at home, David tucked the DNA paper into a drawer. On the wall nearby hung Tommy's 3rd grade class photo, his name finally written below it. No longer a question mark in their lives. Rachel joined him on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you think he'll be okay?" she asked. David didn't answer immediately. "He's here," he said finally, "and we're not letting him go." They sat in silence as the first stars blinked into the sky. The candles had burned low on the church steps earlier, but they hadn't gone out. In a quiet room, miles away, a man watched a security feed on a grainy screen. He wore gloves. His fingers tapped steadily. On the table beside him sat a small wooden box, charred slightly at the corners. Inside, newspaper clippings, school photos, locks of hair labeled with initials. One spot in the box was empty. A card tucked beneath the lid read, "L returned." Next, "ST soon." The man closed the lid calmly. He was not done. The truth is no longer buried, but there's more beneath the surface. Subscribe for more haunting stories, deep dives, and the voices that won't stay silent.